And I just have to say that Attack on Titan was influenced by Berserk. I mean, was it not? Berserk spoilers ends with this timer. Do you know the character who is relentless in his pursuit of his goal, like Eren, that he was willing to sacrifice a lot of the people he cared a lot about? Oh, and for the Berserk fans who just blindly ride the Griffith hate bandwagon, who say Griffith never cared about his men, guys, the whole point of the behelit was to sacrifice what was precious to you. If Griffith did not care about his people, it wouldn't really be him sacrificing something precious, would it? The Count and Griffith had to sacrifice someone important, not just any lump of flesh and blood will do. Griffith cared about the Band of the Hawk, that's why the sacrifice worked. So, what about it? Can we see the Eren and Griffith connection of sacrificing their loved ones for the sake of their goal? How about if I use this panel where he literally says, I am free. Chapter 112, Eren says, I am free. Does that ring any bells? Clearly we can't draw a connection because these two scenes are different in context. How about the fact that he's the White Hawk, the White Falcon, leader of the Band of the Hawk, Band of the Falcon? Do I have to show the bird imagery in Attack on Titan, Wings of Freedom? Eren was influenced by Griffith, even though a lot of people say Eren was Guts. I'll show you why people say Eren was Guts, even though Griffith was more in line with Eren's character. Fellow Berserk fans, do we know a female character who was very obsessed with Griffith after Griffith saved her from being raped and told her to fight for herself? Casca. In Attack on Titan Chapter 6, do we know a female character who was about to be sold as a sex slave and told by Eren to fight for herself? Mikasa. It's fine if you think this is a stretch. In 2015, Gekken Shingekinokyojin Volume 3, the same volume where Isayama said that Eren viewed Mikasa as a mother figure, he also says this: there are some parts of Mikasa that are unrefined, yet on the other hand, she has a brave personality. I think these are influenced from the heroine of Berserk, Casca. At that time while drawing, I didn't realize it, but after a while I realized that Mikasa resembles Casca. Great, so Isayama confirmed he did get influence from Berserk. But Eren has a lot of influence from Griffith, and Mikasa had a lot of influence from Casca. And this was stated in the same volume in the same year where Isayama also said that Eren viewed Mikasa as a mother figure. Can you see how Eren Mika was not the endgame ship? Can you see how Isayama wanted Mikasa to move on from her pitiful obsession with Eren? Can you see why people choose to view Eren as Guts instead of Griffith? Because Casca and Griffith are not what you call a healthy relationship. To admit that Eren was influenced by Griffith would be them admitting that Eren and Mikasa is not a pure relationship.
Oh, but Eren is Guts because Guts is fighting against his fate like Eren.
Oh yeah, in Berserk I definitely remember reading Guts just following his fate and destiny like Eren did in chapter 139. It's funny because ending defenders brag about Eren being a slave to fate. It's extra funny because while Guts was fighting against fate, the one most tied to fate was Griffith. Griffith was fated to be Femto. It's extra funny because I know they say that Eren is Guts because Casca is Mikasa. Guys, we see through on-screen developing Guts and Casca's romantic relationship growing. Eren and Mikasa, you have to assume the off-screen romance. And for the moments that are on-screen, context is now painted as romantic. Listen, Griffith is to Eren as Casca is to Mikasa. Relationship-wise, that is not a good thing. That said, at least we now know why Isayama thought these two were parallels. Seriously though, since we're on the topic of Berserk influencing Attack on Titan, allow me to sidetrack for a moment and let me elaborate on some convenient coincidences. Ready? Berserk Chapter 16, Casca, who was very young, was about to be raped, but was saved by Griffith. But Griffith didn't just save her, he gives her a sword and told her to fight. AOT Chapter 6, Mikasa, who was also very young, was about to be sold as a slave. She was saved by Eren, but Eren didn't just save her, he told her to fight. Both girls impale their attackers. Casca receives a blanket. She says, "His magnificence and the warmth of the blanket he gave me filled my heart." Mikasa receives a scarf. Oh, so warm. It's warm, right? It's warm. Berserk Chapter 17, Casca says, "Since that day, the day I met Griffith, even now, I feel it's been one long dream." AOT Chapter 138, Mikasa felt like she just woke up from a very long dream. Berserk Chapter 17, Casca says, "Back then, I idolized Griffith. He was like some prophet or saint. A miracle. Yes, in my eyes, that's exactly what Griffith was." Berserk Chapter 17, regarding a 10-year-old boy's death, Griffith says, "I wonder if he was happy, dreaming. Did he die enchanted by his dream? Or was death the end of the dream? Was it despair? Maybe my dream is what killed this boy. It is through Griffith pursuing his goal of attaining a kingdom that the boy died. AOT Chapter 105, Sasha died because Eren was moving forward to reach his goals of freedom. John says, Eren, Sasha died because you got the Survey Corps involved in this. Berserk Chapter 17, it is through the boy's death that Casca sees a different side of Griffith. She says, I'd never seen Griffith like that before. Never so somber. Ever since then, I've started viewing Griffith differently. AOT Chapter 123, it is through Sasha's death that Mikasa sees a different side of Eren. One that is not the idealized version she has in her head. Mikasa says, everyone says Eren has changed. Even I believed it. But maybe that's wrong. Eren hasn't changed one bit from the start. If that's who Eren truly was all along, what part of him had I been seeing? Berserk Chapter 79, Guts, who is referring to Griffith, says, is this what you wanted? Berserk Chapter 81, Casca says, or is this really the nightmare you wanted? Answer me, Griffith. AOT Chapter 131, Eren says, I wished for it all to be wiped away. Before anyone says,
oh, Serenity, you told us Eren didn't want to do the rumbling.
Listen, if it's not already clear with my hatred of invaders, I'm pretty sure you'll understand that our interpretations of the dialogue are very different. On a side note, Mikasa had no clue who Eren was. If Eren and Mikasa actually had a romantic relationship, it would not have been due to some deep mutual bond stemming from mutual understanding of one another. AOT Chapter 108, Connie asks Mikasa, what do you think Eren did when Sasha died? Do you think he cried? Do you think he was angry? The bastard laughed. I wonder what could have been so funny. What exactly about Sasha's death? Tell me, Mikasa, why did Eren laugh? You know everything about him, right? Next page, Mikasa doesn't answer. She stays silent. She's clueless. Why does Mikasa not know why Eren laughed? Are romantic relationships not first established through the basic mutual understanding of one another? The fact that Mikasa was not even able to answer Connie's question tells you everything you need to know about Mikasa and Eren's relationship. Why? Chapter 50. Why would Mikasa not know? She witnessed firsthand Eren laughing when he was having a mental breakdown. She saw Eren laugh as a coping mechanism. You know why this detail was put in? To further emphasize that Mikasa did not understand Eren, not even emotionally, even when she was there to witness him break down mentally. Just so you know, History and Eren did have mutual understanding of one another. And this is an understatement for Chapter 66. Conveniently, this is also when he had another mental breakdown. Both scenes have Eren breaking down mentally, with Historia scene being his lowest of all. Yet despite Chapter 66 being his lowest, it was Historia, Chapter 130, who saved him that day. Tell me again, when in the story was Chapter 50 scarf scene referenced again? Never brought up again by any character. Not Eren, not Mikasa, no one. Never until Chapter 139, where the romance was ham-fisted into being the whole point of the story. But Chapter 66 with Historia? Chapter 89, Eren will not sacrifice Historia. Chapter 90, Eren will not sacrifice Historia. Chapter 107, Eren will not sacrifice Historia. Chapter 130, Eren will not sacrifice Historia. Why? Because she was the girl who saved them that day. The worst girl in the world. Again, Chapter 50 was only referenced in the very final chapter. Through this scene and through the bird wrapping a scarf around Mikasa and Mikasa looking at the bird and saying, oh, thanks Eren for wrapping the scarf around me. Continuing on, Berserk Chapter 77, Griffith will sacrifice the Band of the Hawk, because if he doesn't, all the previous sacrifices made would have been for nothing. We want to fight beside you. We're counting on your dream. We're sure we can fight to the castle if you're with us. Receive our swords. We wish to see the kingdom you'll build. Let us fight and serve your standard. I can't take you with me because you're dead. All the bodies he piled up would have been for nothing. The road by which you've come was laid entirely by those boys' corpses. That isn't all of it. You were able to come this far thanks also to the corpses. They added for you so many times over. To come this far, you should have known what kind of place this was. I did know. I knew and I walked. I walked on everyone's corpses to get here. What good is regretting it now? What can I say to the dead now? What good is repenting my sins now? Griffith takes the boy's body. I can't apologize. No, I won't apologize. If I apologize, if I repent, everything will come to an end. I'll never get to reach that place. Griffith will continue to sacrifice to reach his dream. He will sacrifice the Band of the Hawk because otherwise the bodies he piled up would have died for nothing. But did I give a bad example? Okay, let's go back then. Berserk chapter 17. Casca, listen, I don't feel at all responsible for my comrades who've lost their lives under my command. I guess it's because they themselves chose to fight. That's just the way I am. But if, for their sakes, for the sake of the dead, if there's something I can do, that thing is to win. I'll keep winning, to fulfill my dream to which they clung, putting their lives on the line. How about that? Is that a better example? AOT chapter 130, Eren will move forward even if it means sacrificing his friends. Now before you try and argue that Flock was never his friend, okay. Let's use that logic. Despite literally being in the panel right after Eren says he wants his friends to live long lives, Flock was not Eren's friend because Flock died. Marlowe died, so he wasn't Eren's friend. Okay, understandable. Erwin died, so he wasn't Eren's friend. Sasha died, so going by this logic, Sasha was never Eren's friend. Hanji died, guess she was never his friend. Chapter 139, somehow Peak, Reiner, and Annie are part of his friend group. Annie says, he told us to live long, but what about you? We never asked for your help, you reckless idiot. So, Flock, Hanji, and Sasha died because they were not his friends. But Peak, Reiner, and Annie lived because they were his friends. Yeah, okay. Eren will move away from his friends in pursuit of his goals. He is willing to sacrifice them. Chapter 139. Every single scout that died, in order for him to live, in order for him to save Parody, would have died for nothing. And it is through Eren taking responsibility and moving forward to accomplish their mission of saving the island that ensures their deaths would not be in vain. And about fate and destiny, in Berserk, Griffith was fated to be Femto. It was all leading to this moment. Attack on Titan, as ending defenders love to say, Eren was fated to do the rumbling. Now you might say that this is definitely in line with what Invaders was saying about Eren's character and determinism. A little side rant. Guys, my problem with Invaders' video is not about Eren's free will to do the rumbling, but his interpretation of chapter 131. If the outside world was not a threat to Eren and his people, Eren would still do the rumbling, because he wants a blank plane like Armin's book. Now back to Invaders' determinism. Despite Eren being fated to do the rumbling, it was still his choice to do the rumbling. Like how despite Griffith being fated to be Femto, it was still his choice to become Femto by sacrificing the Band of the Hawk. This goes perfectly in line with what Invaders loves to say. So surely you can see how Eren was influenced by Griffith a lot, particularly about fate and destiny, yet still having the ability to make their own choices despite that. Of course, this gets thrown out the window in chapter 139, but I'll talk about that later. Now, I know 100% people will still not be convinced. So, let's see the other hand. Let's use Eren before he got retconned in chapter 139. Eren is Guts. Okay, but that would mean he would be fighting against fate, like Guts. And that's something the ending defenders do not agree with.
He wasn't fighting against fate. He wasn't moving forward for the sake of freeing himself and his people. He never cared about his people. He only cared about his friends. He was doing this because of Armin's book and that twisted perception of freedom.
I'll do a quick recap. In Attack on Titan, Eren's meeting with Flock, Yelena, and Historia happened before he went with the scouts to Marley in chapter 123. The meeting with Yelena means that the declaration of war plan with Zeke was planned even before Eren went to Marley. So, Eren was planning the terrorist attack even before he went to Marley. And long story short, basically he was planning to do the rumbling from the start, and that nothing would change his mind. But he could change his mind. The point of Eren going to Marley was to see if the rumbling was necessary. If Eren saw the future could be changed, the people would be willing to accept parody, meaning he does not have to resort to the rumbling, then he won't do the rumbling. Let me bring up Invaders for a second. Basically, Invaders keeps emphasizing that Eren and Zeke are the ones responsible for the declaration of war, not Willie or Marley. Let me repeat the logic one more time. Eren, through Zeke, manipulates Willie and Marley into doing the declaration of war, so Eren is the one responsible, not Willie or Marley. Marley are the real victims here. If you don't understand my problem, let me give the Berserk analogy. Who is the one responsible for sacrificing the Band of the Hawk? Griffith or the God Hand? Now, the most obvious person responsible is Griffith, right? And I did say that Eren is influenced by Griffith. No. I ask for us to be consistent. I ask for us to keep using ending defender logic on this. Eren manipulated Willie to declare war. Willie is now responsible. Eren is responsible. Griffith was manipulated by the God Hand into sacrificing the Band of the Hawk. Do you see where I'm going with this? The God Hand was responsible for sacrificing the Band of the Hawk. Griffith is not responsible for sacrificing the Band of the Hawk, simply because he was the one manipulated. But let's not just stop there, brother. Listen to what Invader says.
An argument frequently used to justify Eren's attack on the festival is that it was only a response to Willie's declaration of war. However, as I've spent so long explaining, it was the complete opposite. The brothers' plan is what caused Willie to declare war in the first place, and his strategy to make himself into a martyr relied on Parody attacking at that very moment. But what if Eren had changed his mind at the last minute, hadn't attacked, and the festival had ended without incident? In that scenario, it's possible that Willie's entire plan would have fallen apart.
Did you understand what he meant? Basically this. Eren was going against the peace talks. Eren was rebelling against peace. Why was he doing this? Guys, it's an Invaders video. It obviously has something to do with Armin's book. Pay close attention to the following points. Number 1. Eren was preventing Armin from establishing peaceful negotiations with the outside world because he wanted the rumbling from the start. Point number 2. Had Eren not attacked at the declaration of war, the outside world would not have joined Marley in attacking Parody. Armin would have likely been successful in negotiating peaceful solutions with the outside world. Now let's try and see if they're headcanons. I'll start with number 2.
His speech relied on him becoming a victim of the very threat he described. Without this happening, his words would have been empty.
Invaders looked you in the eyes and said, his words would have been empty. How could this be, when already the people were crying tears of joy at the thought of murdering everyone on Parody?
With no imminent threat, it's unlikely that the world would have fiercely rallied against Parody in the same way that we watched happen.
Oh wow, that's a nice fallback plan, brother. Even if I debunked you right here and now, you could easily argue,
oh well, they wouldn't have invaded Parody as fiercely.
But it could get even worse for Willie. If Parody had made their peaceful intentions clear to the world after Willie's speech, his entire strategy could have backfired. If it appeared to the world that Willie's speech was nothing more than cheap manipulation to boost Marley's global standing, their response may have been drastically different.
Really? It was because Eren attacked at the declaration of war that the outside world chose to side with Marley and attack Parody. Okay. Eren plans the declaration of war with Yelena, and by proxy, Zeke. Eren goes to Marley with his friends. Eren meets Ramsey. Mikasa's questioned. Eren goes to the meeting and he leaves. Skip forward a little bit, then it's chapter 100, the declaration of war. Okay, outside world would have joined Marley only if Eren attacked at the declaration of war. I know I am repeating myself a lot of times, but this repetition is necessary. So, if Eren wasn't present at the declaration of war, the outside world would have been singing Kumbaya with Armin. Ready? Chapter 138. When Eren runs away prior to the Eldian Rights Group meeting. 3 things could have happened. Either Zeke cancelled the festival for the declaration of war, or the declaration of war happened, but Eren wasn't present, or the declaration of war has yet to occur. But if you noticed, there's a constant in all 3. He was not there to attack at the declaration of war. This is the perfect testing ground for Invaders as headcanon. Let's check the results. Chapter 138, Eren says, it's been 2 months since the Marleyan War ended. The war to invade Parody will begin soon. What a surprising turn of events. In the timeline, where Eren does not attack at the declaration of war, Marley in the outside world still choose to invade Parody. But this is strange. Invaders' point was so easy to debunk just by reading the story. I must have missed some crucial details, so please let's continue. We might argue this takes place after Eren attacked at the declaration of war. Okay, but Eren ran prior to the declaration of war, because this was after Mikasa's question. I'll get back to this, but this leads to point number 1. In the timeline where Eren does not attack at the declaration of war, meaning the problem of Eren's little rebellion against peace is gone, meaning Armin's idea of talking it out is unhindered, they still invade Parody. Do you know why? Because the outside world, through Isayama's masterful world building, is characterized to be nothing more than racists, hateful towards Parody and the Eldians. Let me take a wild guess. You're going to use Lil Falco. How about you not use an outlier to generalize the population of racist, xenophobic bigots as innocent people? Are you going to use Ramsey and his family as examples of people who were not racist towards Eldians? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna give you another example, and I'll show you why the Ramsey argument is bad. Chapter 114. What about this cleaner? Let's read this great example of kindness. Visitors this early. You don't see that every day. I'll come back later. Oh my god, my heart is warming up already. Oh, Eldians. Oh my goodness, what a surprise, what a plot twist. How could I ever seen this coming? You demons have tainted my workplace. You descendants of devils who've massacred every last thing you could. It'd be natural for your kind to be exterminated. This guy pulled a faster 180 than the Eremikas did on Isayama because of the extra pages. In the same way that the cleaner was kind to them because he did not know they were Eldians, Ramsey and his family were kind to them because he did not know they were Eldians. Let me go a little bit more into chapter 114 for a little bit. Grisha says, remember this well, Zeke. This is the outside world. Not just Zeke, Grisha. Maybe invaders and ending defenders should also remember this well. And if you noticed, this is Grisha, right? And knowing that Eren got the memories of Grisha, it would mean that Eren would have witnessed this moment with his own eyes. Grisha says, if you can't stand this world, you're going to have to change it. Grisha was telling this to Zeke, but surely, with Eren seeing Grisha's memories, Eren might have taken this specific dialogue seriously. Eren can't stand this world because of their cruelty, so he will change it. Now let's continue on with this outside world. Chapter 87, Sergeant Gross says, all of humanity wishes for the same thing, to wipe out every last Eldian. Chapter 89, Eren Kruger says, the only reason they've kept so many Eldians alive inside the Intraman area is because each living Eldian is one more pure Titan they can add to their military forces. Most people think it'd be better to slaughter us all than turn us into such unreliable weapons. Chapter 98, Udo says, the hostility that Eldians face here is nothing compared to the way it is in other countries. You want me to pretend that Eren wasn't disappointed at humanity's cruelty, but just at the idea of humanity existing outside the walls? But let me guess, you are going to use Willie's dialogue in the carriage in chapter 100. Invader says,
if it appeared to the world that Willie's speech was nothing more than cheap manipulation to boost Marley's global standing, their response may have been drastically different.
I am not surprised.
Perhaps Parody could have even made a bid to ally with the nations that opposed Marley.
Ah yes, the Eldians making a bid with the outside world, who hate Eldians even more than Marley. Chapter 123, Kiyomi says, this is the state of the Eldian people outside the walls, and so I must admit it will be very difficult to carry out our plan of Parody forming friendly relationships with other nations. That bid you speak of would have likely ended in failure, as per usual with Armin. Let's read it out. The world will not pay attention to me unless I stand there before them. We must have militaries, journalists, and diplomats from around the world. The most important thing of all is for the Eldians in this interment zone to become tragic victims, myself included. Victims of an unforeseen attack. The world would not take my side if I was the only one to escape. Oh dear, I clearly got debunked. The world would not take Willie's side if he was the only one to escape. Victims of an unforeseen attack? How about the victim of an attack that never happened, because Eren was not present to attack at the declaration of war, because he ran away? Would the world still take your side? Apparently so.
But what if Eren had changed his mind at the last minute, hadn't attacked, and the festival had ended without incident? In that scenario, it's possible that Willie's entire plan would have fallen apart. His speech relied on him becoming a victim of the very threat he described. Without this happening, his words would have been empty. With no imminent threat, it's unlikely that the world would have fiercely rallied against Parody in the same way that we watched happen.
Clearly, invaders. Eren was not there at the festival, yet they're still invading. They still choose to become the invaders. Though you can say they're not invading as fiercely because of what you said before, that was not the logic you were propping up. The logic was that if Eren had not attacked, they would not be invading. Can you see how that fallback plan was oh so convenient?
Regardless, it's clear that the events of history would have played out very differently if Eren had chosen not to attack.
Clearly, the events of history would have been different had Eren chosen not to attack. Again, alternate timeline. Eren ran away. Eren was not there to attack, yet they are still invading. But let me guess, Willie only declared because he knew they would attack at the festival? But do you think Willie would have known that Eren ran away? Chronology-wise, the plan for the declaration of war was set before Eren came to Marley in chapter 123, right? I'll repeat this again. If Eren runs away, he wouldn't have been there to attack at the declaration of war. So why are they still invading? Are we going off on Eren and Zeke's meeting as the actual time they planned that declaration of war? You mean to tell me that Eren only went along with the plan after his optimism got crushed by the Eldian Rights Group meeting? Damn, it's like I said this in part 1. But anyways, so Eren runs away. This meeting never occurs. So I take it that the declaration of war never happened. It got called off. Then why are they still invading? Okay, let's do a little chronology mix-up. Let's say the declaration of war meeting with Yelena and by proxy Zeke happened after Eren leaves the meeting in chapter 123. Okay, since Eren ran away, the declaration of war festival was never happening. Then why are they still invading? Does this not show us that the outside world was only using the declaration of war as an excuse to kill Parody? Even without the declaration, they'll still find another excuse to invade Parody. Of course, you might be able to debunk my argument by saying this entirely different world is not an alternate timeline where the plan for the festival still took place, but instead it's a false memory where Eren was feeding false memories to Mikasa. In that case, either alternate timeline or giving memories, you just lead me to a different problem with the ending entirely, the memory manipulation plot hole. But even if you did debunk me, I'm not finished. But let's just keep biting on this alternate timeline. Do you know why this happens? Why they still invade? Even in this alternate timeline? Because diplomacy was never a possibility, and this was built up by the story through Armin's Talk no Jutsu failures. Chapter 11, Armin Talk no Jutsu, ends with success. They were about to be blown up sky high. Eren's freedom scene would have been nothing compared to this. Chapter 31, Armin's Talk no Jutsu with Annie, ends with success. Look at them, they successfully captured Annie. Chapter 78, Armin's Talk no Jutsu with Bertolt, ends with success. Bertolt exploded himself because of Armin. Chapter 128, Armin's Talk no Jutsu with Samuel and Daz, ends with Armin getting shot in the mouth. Surely, the most obvious symbolism would be, talking does not work. And before you say,
Armin's plans worked well in the past,
that was when Armin actually used his brain and not just his mouth. They captured Bertolt because Armin acted as bait. Armin did not just use Talk no Jutsu, did he? But now, when all Armin does is try talking it out, like someone who only knows about Thorfinn's pacifism vow through memes, the result would be very clear. Armin's peace talks would have never worked. Eren already knew that diplomacy wouldn't work from the future memories he received from touching Historia's hand in chapter 90. He sees the Eldian Rice Group meeting in his memories, sees diplomacy wouldn't work. He visits the Eldian Rice Group meeting, literally confirms to him that diplomacy wouldn't work. Unless you mean to tell me that Eren didn't just manipulate Willy, but he also manipulated this speaker to be all hostile towards Parody. Eren was going against Armin's diplomacy because waiting it out for Armin's unreliable Talk no Jutsu would mean relying on unreliable comrades. Chapter 25, Levi's Choice. Either believe in yourself or your reliable comrades. Chapter 28, Believing in his comrades caused them all to die. And Eren knows his talking is unreliable because Eren was literally there to witness him fail his Talk no Jutsus. Chapter 11, Eren was there to witness. Chapter 31, Eren was there to witness. Chapter 78, Eren was there to witness. Third time's the charm. 3 is the magic number, because by the 4th time. Chapter 128, Eren is not there to witness Armin's failure, because Eren already knew Armin's talking was unreliable. Eren was not going against Armin's diplomacy because he wanted the rumbling, but because Eren already knew diplomacy would never work. If it would never work, and the world will still declare war on Parody, because the world was that hell-bent on destroying Parody, he might as well accelerate the process of them declaring war and get it over with, because the rumbling would guarantee that Parody would not be left up to chance. Chapter 28, because he would believe in himself instead of his unreliable comrades. Eren, by retaliating at the declaration of war, did not ruin any possible chance of diplomacy, of establishing peace between the outside world and Parody, because there was never any chance to talk it out in the first place. But we can't have that. We have to make sure Eren takes complete responsibility for the declaration of war, because otherwise Willy and Marley would be responsible, and that would make Marley the villains instead of Eren. And we all know how Marley are the poor victims here. So, Eren manipulated Willy. So Will is now responsible, Eren is, for the declaration of war. In the same way that in Berserk, Griffith is now responsible for sacrificing the Band of the Hawk, because the God hand manipulated Griffith. Of course, a possible rebuttal to this would be Eren manipulating Grisha into killing the Rice family. By our supposed logic, Grisha isn't to blame at all, it's Eren for killing the family. I like that consistency already, but I'm pretty sure the people responsible would be both Eren and Grisha. The point I was trying to make was that invaders put all the responsibility on Eren with the declaration of war. Invaders made sure that Willy and Marley can't be blamed.
If you don't believe me, check out this video. But I'm not quite done yet with Invaders' idea of Eren rebelling against any peace talks. Listen to Invaders here.
One of the most common criticisms directed at the scouts is that they supposedly did nothing to prevent Marley's attack, and that it was their inaction which forced Eren to unleash the rumbling. That's completely untrue. The scouts did everything they could to reach an alternative solution, even going so far as to sneak into Marley themselves. There's not much else that could have been reasonably asked of them.
How about I ask for Armin to not waste time busting his colossal nuts to a crystal for 4 years? Would that be a reasonable thing to ask, Invaders? Chapter 127, The Conversation Between Hanji and John. We should be able to buy ourselves a few years of time even if they do come to destroy the island. But the last time we looked for a possible solution like that, we ran out of time and we're still empty-handed. That's why Eren decided to wipe out the rest of the world. Chapter 132, Hanji says, I'll admit it. I had no solutions, no hope, and no future to show Eren. I was powerless. Chapter 133, Armin says, We were wrong. We're the ones who forced you to this point. Invader says,
One of the biggest reasons this belief gained so much prominence was because of Eren and Hanji's discussion in Chapter 107. The ambiguous translation of Eren's dialogue seems to imply that he was desperately searching for an alternative to the rumbling, yet could not find one due to the scouts' incompetence. However, what Eren was actually saying was that Hanji had no choice but to rely on him and Zeke, as the military would be powerless without them. What was seen by many as a cry for help was in reality the complete opposite, and by this point, Eren had already decided that he would destroy the world.
Gentlemen, you just witnessed Invaders make up his most obvious headcanon. So, Chapter 107, you would obviously interpret the scene of Eren's question to Hanji that Eren is asking for an alternative to the rumbling. Chapter 132, Hanji says, and you might interpret her dialogue as a response to Chapter 107. I'll admit it, I had no solutions, no hope, and no future to show Eren. I was powerless. But we cannot have that interpretation now, can we? Because it would imply, it would suggest that Eren does not want to do the rumbling and is still looking for alternative solutions. It would mean that the rumbling was Eren's last resort in response to the outside world. Can't have that. So let's recontextualize the scene. Now, instead of Eren asking for an alternative solution to the rumbling, it is now Eren telling Hanji that there is no other way other than the rumbling. Eren here is actually bragging, instead of desperately and angrily asking for an alternative. The original and common interpretation of this scene is more reliable than Invaders' interpretation, simply because the scouts' incompetence leading to the rumbling is referenced back in Chapter 127, Chapter 132, Chapter 133. Chapters which I literally just showed the dialogue of. Because these chapters are special. Because if you notice, it's not the audience that described the scouts as incompetent. It's the scouts themselves that admitted their own incompetence in finding an alternative solution. And I did not even include Armin's little crystal fetish in Chapter 110. And to add to this, refer to John. In Chapter 124, John says, in other words, this is the result those outsiders brought upon themselves. There was nothing we could have done, right? In Chapter 127, John says, for decades to come, far into the future, the world will continue to look on us with loathing. So stopping Eren means destroying this island. John says, if we don't completely destroy that island, we'll never know when they'll destroy the world. That's what they'll say. It'll stir up more rage than Willie Tiber's speech. Hanji says, you're right, John. Eren resorted to this because of my feckless idealism. Chapter 127, John says, if he hadn't watched his mother get eaten alive when the wall was breached, Eren would have never done anything like this. You left him no choice but to use the rumbling, didn't you? So yeah, it really makes you wonder. If Invaders' interpretation of the story is the correct narrative, why does he need to recontextualize many scenes so drastically? And before you say anything, I understand recontextualization through the Titan Shifter reveals. But the way Invaders does it...
For the next hour and a half, I'd like to ask you to forget everything you think you know about the series.
It is a bit much.
Understanding Eren takes not only a deep dive of the entire story, but also an open mind and a willingness to reconsider your preconceptions and past expectations. If you can do that, I think you'll find that Eren's arc is a fascinating piece of character writing grounded in philosophy, with a lot to say about the meaning of freedom.
I just love how this man gaslights.
You have to forget everything you know about the series, because if you don't, you'll remember details in the series that debunks Invaders' headcanons. You'll see more examples of what I'm talking about later.
But before we leave, let me just address a little something. Did you notice I used a plot hole of the alternate timeline to debunk? We had to go along with the assumption that it was an alternate timeline. Invaders says at 38 minutes 30 seconds.
Before anything else, you have to understand that in AOT there is only one timeline, and it is the one that we see. There are no alternate or split timelines.
Oh my god, I got debunked.
But darling, here, let me explain. Why did I do this? Why did I use this impossible alternate timeline? Simple. There's two reasons. What happens when you talk about Mikasa's memory manipulation plot hole to an ending defender? They'll either say it's paths or an alternate timeline. Like, listen, just because your group of ending defenders don't believe it's an alternate timeline doesn't mean no ending defender believes it's an alternate timeline. So now what if we burn one of their little fallback plans, their alternate timeline? So that if they use alternate timeline, believe with all their hearts that it's an alternate timeline, well, that would confirm that in the alternate timeline where Eren did not attack at the declaration of war, the outside world and Marley would still choose to invade Parody. That even with Eren gone in this alternate timeline, meaning Armin should have guaranteed his peace talks, because Eren wasn't hijacking their plans for peace, Armin was still not able to talk it out peacefully. Why? Because diplomacy was now a possibility. Eren not going with the alternative solutions wasn't because he was that much of a slave to his idea of freedom, but because the alternative solutions were not going to work. So what would they do if you debunk their alternate timeline excuse? Well, they fall back to saying it's paths. Makes your job easier. Now all you have to do is debunk Mikasa being able to go inside paths. Yes, Eren uses the founding titan powers on Mikasa Ackerman to drag her to paths. Oh, that is nice. So the king could have dragged the Ackermans into paths this entire time and have them die of old age, but chose not to. That's not how time and paths work. Isayama retconned that in the final chapter, so time really does continue while you're in paths. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a sense of urgency for Armin, for him to leave paths as soon as possible. Oh, don't worry. This is just a made-up paths reality where Eren was just making stuff up, like the outside world attacking despite Eren not being present. Yes, that's right, he made that up. Because we all know that the outside world would not have joined Willy if Eren had not attacked, because they are very reasonable people. Yeah, okay. That's the first reason why I use this alternate timeline. Here's the second reason. Pay attention to the logic between Invaders' Eren video and his rumbling video. Invader says at 1 hour, 13 minutes, 46 seconds.
Eren showed Mikasa an alternate reality, one in which they abandoned everything to spend their remaining time together, but a world like this could never exist. This was a world founded on a time paradox, one in which the island ended up being destroyed because of Eren's inaction.
Did you see it? In his Eren video, Invaders himself admits Eren running away is Eren's inaction. So, if Eren was not present to attack at the declaration of war, his inaction would lead to his island being destroyed. But in his rumbling video, again by Invaders' own words, it would be because of Eren's inaction that the island would be successful at finding peace. If Eren was not present to attack at the declaration of war, his inaction would lead to his island finding peace with the outside world, meaning his island would not be destroyed. Basically, if you drew the conclusion that Invaders was blaming Eren for everything and making it so that the outside world and Marley had no responsibility, then you'd be right. Because Invaders went against his own logic in order to blame Eren for everything. But if you noticed, the only time Invaders does not blame Eren would be if he went along with the 50-year plan and sacrificed Historia and her children. Now you might say, this goes against the theme of sins of the father, of not burdening the children. Eren and Historia would not surpass their fathers because they themselves would allow the children to be burdened. But again, remember that Invaders told you to forget. Sins of the father, surpassing the father. Well, you're supposed to forget those themes exist. Forget this theme, just like how Isayama forgot about this theme. And even if you did remember, well, the sins of the father is clearly referring to passing down the titan powers, and Eren surpassed his father by removing the titans. Even though Isayama said in 2016 that they're different. Lying to themselves for the sake of their father's wishes, or fighting for what they themselves believe in. Different from the fight against the titans, or against the monarchy. This is a fight against the binding curse known as the father.
Invaders wants you to forget everything, because if you don't have an open mind, you would realize he overemphasized slave to freedom as a way to cover up how sins of the father was never really concluded properly. Because Eren passed his sins to the next generation. Eren, Historia, and everyone else burdened the future generation.
But guys, you just didn't understand the story. The major theme was not sins of the father. It was actually everyone has to be drunk on something.
Yes, invaders, gaslight us more.
But, what was that? Invaders didn't say that. This is a straw man argument? Oh, okay.
25 seconds.
When Attack on Titan ended, many people were quick to decide that the ending was terrible. Even beyond that, many people accused it of being retconned, that for whatever reason, Isayama had backed out of his vision at the last minute, creating a new ending and scrapping what he had spent a decade planning. But as the months passed, and as I continued to discuss the ending with more and more people, I began to come to a realization. Not only is the belief that the ending was retconned entirely incorrect, but the ending we got was the only logical conclusion the story could have had.
This is the only logical conclusion the story could have had. A conclusion where the children are burdened. You know, a more logical conclusion would be Eren and Historia having a child together. A child they will not burden. They would surpass their fathers by not burdening the children. Again, this is not for the sake of shipping. This is for the sake of the narrative and its theme of sins of the father. 1 hour, 14 minutes, 7 seconds.
Everyone had to be drunk on something to keep moving forward. And this was, in the end, true for Eren as well. Eren was drunk on freedom, and he'd come to understand just how that desire had enslaved him.
Was Eren looking for mental freedom? Or was it the physical freedom of Armin's book, of no walls caging him in, be it literal walls, titans, or humanity? In Eren's pursuit of freedom, is it to make the world a blank plane to fit with Armin's book? Was he a slave to that mental freedom? Or the physical freedom to not be oppressed by the cruel humanity that existed? The physical freedom to go wherever he wants without being murdered for being an Eldian? Invaders at 1 hour, 16 minutes, 17 seconds.
Eren was a very childish character. His reason for doing the rumbling was, too, a childish one. He didn't think it was justified, but he did it anyways. He was not a stoic anti-hero, forced to become a monster for what he thought was right.
Again, the alternative solution is the 50-year plan. Eren, opting to not condemn Historia and her entire bloodline into burdening children, isn't very childish. By doing the rumbling, becoming a monster for what he thought was right, saving his people who have done nothing wrong, Eren would not allow the future generation of parody to be burdened by the sins of their fathers. But I guess we just forget everything. Now let's continue on.
Chapter 131. Sure, with Yelena and Zeke, he planned to do the declaration of war before he went to Marley. Sure, he told Flock that he would do the rumbling before he went to Marley. Sure, he told Historia that he would do the rumbling before he went to Marley. However, he was still looking for any indication that the future could be changed. If Eren saw any evidence that the future could be changed and was not set in stone, then Eren would choose to not go forward with the plan. If the outside world was not another wall denying Eren his freedom, he would not have wanted to destroy the outside world, because they would not be trying to take away his freedom. They would not be impeding on his freedom. Chapter 123. If Eren saw that Mikasa had a different response to his question, that would indicate the future could be changed. If Eren saw that the Eldian Rice Group meeting was not as hostile towards parody, indicating that talking could work, that Armin could talk his way out of Paradis's fate of being annihilated, then Eren could have easily discarded the plan for the declaration of war. The rumbling, which he saw in his memories, would not be required for him to do as a last resort. Chapter 11. Eren says, "But Armin, if you tell me you can convince the garrison that I'm no threat to them, I'll believe you and stay. But if you don't think you can do that, I'll follow through on my last resort." Like, do you get it? Invaders and his boys forgot everything to defend the ending. We should not forget the story. We should remember. Like in Chapter 11, if Armin's diplomacy does not look like it was going to work through the failure of the Eldian Rice Group meeting, then Eren would use the rumbling as the last resort. But if the meeting was a success, then Eren would believe in Armin and stay. Would Eren not even have the agency to even say a simple no to his brother Zeke?
Let's talk about invaders briefly again. This time about the Reiner meeting. Long story made short, basically Reiner and Eren are two sides of the same coin.
Reiner said he was going to save humanity, but Reiner was actually selfish and just wanted to be seen as a hero. Since Reiner is like Eren, then Eren must also be selfish like this. Therefore, Eren was not actually doing this to save humanity inside the walls, but for his selfish desire to make the world like Armin's book. Why take this interpretation? Because the previous interpretation of this scene focuses on Eren showing empathy for his enemies by talking about Reiner's responsibility for his mother's death. You know why we don't focus on that interpretation anymore and instead focus on Eren's selfish desire for Armin's book? Because Eren asking Reiner about his mother's death makes no sense with the knowledge that Eren was actually the one who killed his mother. So of course you have to focus on Reiner's selfishness to be seen as a hero, meaning Eren was also selfish about Armin's book. Invader says at 15 minutes 49 seconds.
Reiner was no longer under the influence of Marley's propaganda, but if Reiner had come to that understanding, then why had he still made the choice to destroy Wall Rose? He had no proof, but he had a suspicion he knew exactly why Reiner had chosen to destroy the wall, and if he was right, it meant that he and Reiner were exactly alike. Eren's assumption was that Reiner knew it was wrong to kill the people of the walls, but still did it anyways, not because of propaganda, but because it was what he wanted.
That's great and all, but I'll give a simpler interpretation. Chapter 97, they're the same because Eren and Reiner continue to move forward. Reiner told Eren to move forward and he did. That's why they're the same. Chapter 96, you know why Reiner destroyed the walls? Not because he believed it was right, but because it was what he wanted to do? Because the alternative is to run back to Marley and die. Reiner's only real option, because he does not want to die, is to move forward on the plan. Eren's alternative is to stay back on Parody and wait for them all to die. Chapter 100, Eren's only option, because he does not want to die, because he was born into this world, is to move forward. That's why Eren said he and Reiner were the same. After Eren says they're the same, Eren says he will keep moving forward until all of his enemies are destroyed. Here, let's read it in order. Chapter 100, Willie says, I would choose to have never been born if it was up to me. I've hated my blood. More than anyone else, I wished for the extinction of all Eldians. But I do not wish to die, because I was born into this world. I want you to fight with me against the devils on Parody. Chapter 100, Eren says, I was right. I'm the same as you. I think we were born this way. I just keep moving forward until all my enemies are destroyed. Did you see how I did not need to use Armin's book for this? If you still want to argue Eren is the same as Reiner because he's selfish. Chapter 123, the interpretation of Eren's selfishness would have been him prioritizing his small home of Parody over the lives of the outside world. Prioritizing the lives of your minority group instead of the majority is a selfish act. Chapter 131, because more people will die. And Eren would do this selfish act if he sees that Parody is fated to die. Can you also see why they don't take this interpretation anymore? Because this would mean Eren cared about his people. Oh my god, can't have that. And it was Willie's responsibility in declaring war that later led to Eren being required to do the rumbling to save his people? Oh my god, blaming the perpetrators who started this entire war instead of the Paradisian victims who did nothing wrong? Can't have that. But moving on. If Eren saw that the future could be changed, meaning Paradis's fate could change without having to do the rumbling, then Eren would not have to resort to using the rumbling to change that fate. Eren was fighting against fate. Chapter 131, the dialogue where Eren is walking through the streets of Marley. Eren is depressed about the thought of killing all these people. He does not want to go along with the rumbling, but will do the rumbling to avoid Paradis's fate of being destroyed. His dialogue with Ramsey emphasizes on this aspect of checking whether the future could be changed. Chapter 107, Eren's conversation with Hanji, ends with Eren asking if there was another way. What Invader seems to downplay in Chapter 107 is Eren's worry for Historia. Eren did not want to sacrifice Historia. Chapter 123, the scouts were willing to sacrifice Historia. If the meeting did not go well, they would sacrifice Historia. Chapter 123, since the meeting did not go well, this would mean that they would sacrifice Historia. Since Eren wants to save his island, but does not want to sacrifice Historia, he would not go with the scouts' plan. He would do a different plan. He would follow Zeke and attack at the declaration of war. But Invaders, again, puts the emphasis on just getting to Zeke. Eren didn't leave because the outcome of the meeting would result in them sacrificing Historia. He left because he was a slave to freedom. And him being a slave to freedom means he wants to do the rumbling.
Is it out of his want to physically free himself and his people from their persecution and oppression, and from being required to burden entire bloodlines? Or his want to get to his mental freedom of Armin's book? So much so that if the outside world wasn't cruel towards his people, he still would have destroyed the world. Chapter 107, Eren worrying about Historia, is followed by Hanji discussing Eren's actions at the declaration of war. Invaders, as I showed earlier, told us that Eren wasn't asking for an alternative solution. Yeah, okay, Hanji was discussing about finding alternative solutions. But it was only Eren who refused entirely the option of sacrificing Historia to save the island. Hanji, because she and the scouts were willing to sacrifice Historia, had no right to tell Eren, "Do you not care about what happens to Historia?" Because Eren does care. Chapter 130, an awful lot, because he does not want to repeat the cycle of children eating their parents. Hanji and the scouts were willing to allow that cruel cycle to continue. It is after Hanji asked this question that Eren would demand an answer. Tell me if there is another way. Tell me if there is another way to save this island other than sacrificing Historia and burdening children. If you do not have another way, then I will do the rumbling. Through my walk in Marley, it told me that the reason why I saw myself rumble was because we never found an alternative solution. Not just because I wanted it, not just because humanity existed, but because I saw the cruelty of humanity and the futility of human conflict. Similar to Ericos in The Eternal Champion. Through the rumbling, I will remove both the cycle of hatred and the cycle of children eating their parents. But invaders, as I showed, recontextualized the scene to emphasize on Eren wanting the rumbling from the start. The previous interpretation was focusing on Eren freeing himself and his people from burdening the children by ending cycles through the rumbling. Invaders' interpretation, oh, forget all that. Oh, slave to freedom. He was drunk on the idea of fighting for freedom. That's why he attacked at the declaration of war. Because he always planned for the rumbling. But Eren did not want to resort to doing the rumbling. That's the whole point of him trying to find alternative solutions. He did not want to go along with the rumbling. But when he did do the rumbling, chapter 133, he will not leave parody up to fate. Eren was fighting against fate of parody being annihilated. When Eren says he was disappointed that humanity existed outside the walls, why are we taking this so literally? Because Eren did not just discover humanity existed. Literally right after he discovered this, literally in the next chapter, he gained memories of Grisha and what he had to go through just because he went over the walls. For Grisha and Eren, their scenery of the blimp and the ocean was met with the cruelty of humanity just because they were born as Eldians. In Grisha's case, his sister was fed alive to dogs. For Eren, the entire outside world wanted to kill him and his people, both cases just because they were born as Eldians. When Eren was disappointed that humanity existed, would a better interpretation of the scene be that humanity was just another wall that Eren had to go through? That he had to go through all this suffering just to be free from the walls? Just to realize the ocean was just another wall, that humanity across that ocean was also just another wall? Chapter 90, Eren ignores Armin. Eren is not focused on the scenery of the ocean, which was part of Armin's dream, Eren says. On the other side of the walls is the ocean, and on the other side of the ocean is freedom. That's what I always believed. Oh wow. So was Eren disappointed that the world wasn't like a blank plane like Armin's book? Or because humanity was impeding on their freedom? But I was wrong. It's enemies that are on the other side of the ocean. This is all exactly as I saw in my old man's memories. You mean the memories that showed you how racist the outside world was? Damn, it's like Eren was disappointed by the brutality of humanity outside the walls, not just because they existed. Eren saw the futility of human conflict, right? Those enemies on the other side of here, if we kill them all, does that mean we'll be free? That Eren was disappointed that humanity existed because of their cruelty and brutality, not just because they existed outside the walls unlike Armin's book, not just because the outside world wasn't a blank plane like Armin's book. What is the point of all this recap? I had 2 points. Number 1.
Did you notice that the chronology did not matter in the analysis of Eren trying to find whether the future could be changed?
I can't fathom why such a grievous error would have such minimal impact on part 1. I said the error did not affect the point I was making with Eren.
Point number 2. This point may be a bit convoluted, but I hope I can explain it well enough that people can understand. There are aspects of Guts in Griffith and Eren's character.
However, it is mainly Griffith's character that was more in line with Eren's character. Griffith was fated to be femto. It made sense for Griffith to sacrifice the Band of the Hawk because of his ruthless determination to get to his goal of getting his kingdom. He will not choose to remain a cripple. The God Hand did not force Griffith to become femto. I don't get it. So you're telling me that Eren was planning to do the 100% rumbling, but saw that he would be stopped at 80% when he came into contact with Ymir.
So Eren was doing the 100% up to chapter 122, then saw himself get stopped at 80%. So he doesn't bother going higher than 80%.
Chapter 139, Eren says that he planned this. He planned to be stopped at 80%. All of this was orchestrated by Eren after he received his future memories at the Medal Awards ceremony, which was all the way back in chapter 90, when he touched Historia's hand. So he was never planning a 100% rumbling from that moment.
But you might say, Invaders already addressed this in his video. He says, at 39 minutes 9 seconds.
When he kissed Historia's hand at the medal ceremony, Eren saw his own future. However, the way that this happened, and what Eren learned from this event, are almost universally misunderstood.
Oh, that's great and all, but did Invaders address the fact that Isayama was being illogical with his own story by forgetting what he wrote? Or more specifically, retconning what he wrote? Mikasa's an acronym, yet she still had her memories manipulated. Zeke dying shouldn't have stopped the rumbling, but it still did. Eren was doing 100% rumbling after he touched Historia's hand, and he was doing 100% rumbling even after he received the Founding Titan. Isayama retcons this by saying that he was actually planning the 80% from the very moment he touched Historia's hand. Of course it makes it so that this scene makes no sense. That's why it's bad writing, because Eren was never planning 80%. There's another thing. So, Invaders and EDs love to say that Eren's priority was number 1, experiencing freedom, number 2, letting his friends live long lives. Okay, so after he receives memories from Ymir in chapter 122, he knows they will stop him and the rumbling. And somehow he knew they would be safe because he saw them stop him. Chapter 139, Eren says, I got all of you, my precious friends, wrapped up in this battle without even knowing if you'd survive it. But his priority was still his friends living long lives. Don't tell me it's because of the Founding Titan memories. I hope we realize that Hanji died after Eren got the full Founding Titan powers. Any of Eren's friends could have died in chapter 124 when Zeke's Titans got out of control after Eren got the full Founding Titan powers. Eren does not know what happens after his death, right? The Marlanes could have easily gunned down the defenseless Eldians, which obviously include his friends. The interpretation of Sasha's death. Eren already knew through his future memories that she would die, which gave Eren the realization that he had to sacrifice his friends to reach his goal. But with Invaders, Eren only saw the future when he got the Founding Titan powers, so Eren didn't see Sasha die, and he didn't come to this realization. Okay, so why did Eren ask Connie this question, as if Eren was hoping for her last words to be different from his future memories? Well anyways, let's look at touching Ymir gave him memories. These memories showed him that he would be stopped at 80%. This still does not make any sense. Because you noticed it, right? Invaders was constantly propping up Eren's nature to do the rumbling. That he did the rumbling, planned 100% rumbling, because it was his nature. Oh wow, of course. Eren rejects anything and everything that does not involve the rumbling because he was a slave to freedom. Oh, he worked with Yelena and Zeke to do the declaration of war in order to do the rumbling. Oh, because he wanted the 100% rumbling. That even if the outside world was kind towards Eldians, he would still rumble the earth? Well, if all the memories were truly him and his own free will and desires, then he should have seen himself complete 100%. Determinism and deterministic universe is the future being shaped by the wills and desires, right? The Alliance choosing to stop Eren is because of their character's desires. But what about Eren who desired to complete the rumbling 100%? So, if he saw himself getting stopped at 80%, why would this be the motivation for him to give up? Is it because there's no point in stopping them? Because he saw that they would stop him? In Berserk, if Femto saw the future and saw that God stopped him from gaining his kingdom, what would Femto do? The future Femto saw was his own future self being stopped by Guts, right? Femto would not bother trying to change that fate, because that future Femto was Femto himself, because determinism. There would be no point in stopping Guts, because Femto already saw Guts stop him. No, I'm pretty sure Femto would raise hell on earth to make sure that future memory of being stopped by Guts doesn't happen. Because Femto wants his kingdom, Eren, who wants to complete the rumbling 100%, just because he saw himself get stopped at 80%, should try to change events to make it so he doesn't get stopped. Because his character was one who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. Does Eren not even have the agency to try? At least Femto just letting fate play out would basically be Femto allowing Guts to stop him, because despite seeing himself get stopped, Femto did not do anything to change that fate. Let me give an example from Invaders' video.
Though he had the ability to easily take them away, Eren intentionally left the Alliance with their Titan powers. All of that was to ensure that they wouldn't hesitate to kill him, and that they would have the means to do so.
If Femto knew that a special sword was able to defeat him, and Femto has that sword, and it is Femto's desires to not be defeated so he can have his kingdom, what would Femto do with the sword? Femto gives that sword to Guts. Why give Guts a sword that can defeat him? Because Femto saw in his future memories that Guts defeats him and denies him a kingdom, so it makes sense. Wow! Eren's free will and desires to complete the rumbling 100%, but was somehow satisfied with only 80%, makes perfect sense. This is fate and destiny.
Oh, but determinism is not fate and destiny. It's future shaped by wills and desires of people of the past.
Yeah, but Eren's desires was 100% rumbling. It was Eren's choice to do the rumbling, like it was Griffith's choice to become Femto by sacrificing the Band of the Hawk. Because both characters are relentless in pursuit of their goals. Eren gaining freedom, and Griffith gaining his kingdom. Think of it this way, brother. Slave to freedom isn't bad by itself, because we already knew that Eren had the resolve to do everything to be free. But why it makes no sense is when certain people say it's now slave to mental freedom. Listen, the freedom that Eren was fighting for was physical freedom, the freedom to explore the outside world without being oppressed. But let's continue. So, this was Eren's desires to do the rumbling to achieve his goal of freedom. Griffith's desires to sacrifice to become Femto to achieve his goal of attaining a kingdom that despite it being their fate, it was still their free will and their own choice. Berserk chapter 78 Void says, "If it be reason that destiny transcend human intellect and make playthings of children, it is cause and effect that a child bears evil and confront destiny." Griffith was destined to be a godhand simply because of his nature. However, like I said earlier, for Eren, in chapter 139, he was following a predetermined path laid out for him by Ymir. He was following all of this to get to Mikasa's choice. With chapter 139, Eren no longer had that free will or agency to make his own choices. Griffith was fated to be Femto, but it was still Griffith's choice and free will and agency to become Femto. It was through Griffith's desires to get his own kingdom that he chose to become Femto. Attack on Titan. It was no longer about Eren's desires to do the rumbling and getting freedom that he chose to do the rumbling. It was now because he was following fate. Chapter 139 took Eren's fate and destiny to do the rumbling, yet still having his free will and choice to do it, to it was only Eren's fate and destiny to do the rumbling. It was not his choice. He was just following the predestined path. All of it was to arrive at that result. That's why I moved forward. The Founder's powers made it so he had no choice. Because if he did, he would have gone with his actual desires of 100%. He wouldn't have seen himself be stopped. So how about this? Eren completes 100% of the rumbling. That's his main motivation and desires satisfied. Eren temporarily restricts his friends so they are not able to stop him. He said he won't take his friends' freedom, yeah, that didn't stop Armin from getting taken out. Stop his friends so he can guarantee their safety. Complete the rumbling. That's extra assurance of his friend's safety. And they get freedom afterwards. And with how determinism is the future being shaped by one's free will and desires, and it was Eren's desires to live with his friends, Eren would survive the entire rumbling and return home. If Eren returned home after 100% a rumbling, but he returns to Mikasa, there is no ending defender on earth that will keep saying genocide is bad. You know why Isayama robbed Eren of his free will and agency? Because Isayama viewed Eren as a good guy because of Eren's voice actor, and that's why he ended the story the way he did. And what better way to redeem a mass murderer and make him into a hero than say he had no choice in the matter to begin with? Oh, you can't blame Eren. He was forced by fate and Founder Ymir. The Founding Titan powers got my head all messed up. I had to do it.
You know what I mean?
Let's look at the insanity defense. The insanity defense, also known as the mental disorder defense, is an affirmative defense by excuse in a criminal case, arguing that the defendant is not responsible for their actions due to a psychiatric disease at the time of the criminal act. Key word, not responsible. What rule is used in the insanity defense? This test relies on the notion that defendants may be diseased, such that they are incapable of understanding their own actions. The Durham rule holds that if a criminal defendant's mental disease or defect was the reason that he or she committed a crime, the defendant is not guilty by reason of insanity. Wow, it's like Isayama tried to remove Eren's responsibility of doing the rumbling by making it so Eren was insane and incapable of understanding his own actions. Don't believe me? Chapter 139, Eren says, I'm sure none of them wanted to die either. Ah yes, Eren, I'm sure the people you stomped probably did not want to die either. But seriously though, what 3 things must be proven for a person to be declared legally insane? They did not know that their actions were illegal. They did not know they were committing the act. They were forced to commit the offense by an irresistible force. Chapter 139, Eren says, I don't know why, I just had to. Think of it this way. You can either take this dialogue literally and see that Eren literally did not know why he did the rumbling. Or you can take Invaders' interpretation, which requires headcanons, and say he does not know why because it was so in his nature. Listen, if ending defenders can take this scene very literally, what stops them from taking this scene literally? Oh, that's right, because if you take it literally, then the story and the ending takes a nosedive straight to rock bottom. Because if you take it literally, you won't need to use Invaders as headcanons. No headcanons means no excuses for the ending. Isayama would have to be responsible for his bad writing. Take it literally and your interpretation would be, Eren was influenced so hard by the irresistible force of the Founding Titan powers that it literally made him forget why he did it. And because of the Founding Titan, you can excuse Eren's responsibility of doing the rumbling by reason of insanity. So of course it's a no-brainer. They have to use Invaders' interpretation and say it was Eren's nature and not because of any outside influence. Invaders says 48 minutes 41 seconds.
Again, Eren is in no way compelled by supernatural forces, like fate or destiny, to take these actions.
Really? Not because of any outside influence. Wow, okay, I'll sidetrack for a moment. Chapter 139, Eren says, the only thing I knew for sure was the result of Mikasa's choice. All of it was to arrive at that result. That's why I moved forward. Oh wow. Founder Ymir wanted to see Mikasa's choice. So because Ymir wanted it, and the result is Titans being removed, Eren had to do it. But please Eren, elaborate some more. Armin, my head's gotten all messed up. The Founder's power has made it so that there's no past or future. It all exists at once. So I had to do it. Wow, the Founder's powers and the Founder Ymir made it so he had to do it. This is definitely not an outside influence. But if you still do not understand, let me try simplifying it. 2 interpretations. Number 1, Eren literally does not know why he did the rumbling. He was forced by an irresistible external force, the Founding Titan powers and the Founder Ymir, to commit the rumbling. This removes his responsibility of doing the rumbling because his free will and agency is removed. You cannot hold Eren accountable for the rumbling anymore. Eren did the rumbling to reach Mikasa's choice, again because of the Founder? He had to do the rumbling because of an irresistible force? You can't hold Eren responsible by reason of insanity. Invader says 27 minutes 42 seconds.
Personally, I think it's ridiculous to say that we can't be held accountable for our own actions, just because of the parts of our personalities that are out of our control. Isayama certainly isn't saying that Eren is free of the consequences of his actions either.
Oh, but Isayama was basically doing just that, Invaders. Because Eren had no agency, no choice in the matter to begin with. Isayama, in the final chapter, made Eren very sympathetic. Oh, poor Eren. He was a victim this whole time. Victim to the Founding Titan powers manipulating him. So, when Eren is viewed as a hero instead of a villain by the Alliance, because Isayama wrote the ending to fit with how Eren's voice actor voiced him like a good guy, Isayama thought it would make sense to the readers. Number 2, Invaders' interpretation. Eren does not know why he did the rumbling, because freedom was so ingrained into his nature, specifically Armin's freedom, through Armin's book, was ingrained so deeply into his psyche that even if the outside world was not cruel and brutal, Eren would still do the rumbling to make the world a blank plane like Armin's book, simply because humanity existed outside the walls. Ah yes, he was just fighting for the mental freedom of Armin's book. Killing innocent people like the 3 poor human traffickers who murdered Mikasa's parents and were going to sell Mikasa off as a slave. Invader says at 36 minutes 37 seconds.
In the Marley arc, we were introduced to an entirely new cast of protagonists on the opposite side of the conflict. And now with their perspective, we were able to see Eren's inhuman drive for freedom is the terrifying reality that it was.
Listen folks, if your evidence for Eren being a villain all this time is him saving Mikasa from being turned into a child sex slave by human traffickers, maybe try harder. I'll give a simpler interpretation. Chapter 46 because of Eren's sense of justice and morality, and Chapter 121 because Mikasa was getting her freedom taken by animals. Eren killed those kidnappers. Or are we supposed to forget about Eren's sense of justice as well? Invader says at 25 minutes 11 seconds.
Zeke never understood, but the reason for this was because Eren was someone who was a slave to his own nature.
Invader says at 26 minutes 12 seconds.
In other words, the way we're born is out of our control. Is it a murderer's fault if it's in their nature to murder? If not, then who's to blame? Is it just a coincidence that you and I were not born as someone with the inherent desire to kill? This question is at the center of the moral dilemma being explored with Eren's inherent nature.
Psycho Eren, most definitely in line with how Eren's voice actor Yuki Kaji voiced him like a good guy, that Isayama wrote Eren's character in the ending to be a guy good, like Eren's actor voice, Kaji Yuki, made him out to be. Well, ending defenders would clearly not use the literal interpretation because Invaders' interpretation was his slave to the idea of freedom. But even Invaders' interpretation that Eren was so much of a slave to freedom that he had to do it. He had no choice but to do it, despite 80% not being his desire. This would still excuse Eren's rumbling due to Isayama's writing, despite what Invader says in his video. Because if you noticed in chapter 139, Isayama was really trying hard to turn Eren back into a tragic hero. Hero, not a villain, a hero. If he really doesn't know the reason why he did it, then you can't fault him. Founder powers really did a number on him. Invader says at 55 minutes, 55 seconds.
In this way, I believe that the universe of AOT operates on the theory of compatibilism. The belief that we are still responsible for the actions we take, even though we lack true free will.
Oh, but gentlemen, surely it was obvious enough that Isayama tried to redeem Eren at the end. And what better way to do that than to take Eren's responsibility for the rumbling away, by saying he was manipulated into doing so by the irresistible force of the Founder.
And you have to remember, this is supposed to be consistent with Invaders' own logic. Did you forget? Let me remind you then. Eren, through Zeke, manipulated Willy and Marley into declaring war, so Willy is not responsible. Eren is responsible. The Godhead manipulated Griffith into sacrificing the Band of the Hawk, so Griffith is not responsible. The Godhead is responsible. The Founder Ymir manipulated Eren into doing the rumbling in order for her to witness Mikasa make a choice, so Eren is not responsible. The Founder is responsible. Do you understand?
But let me take a wild guess. Oh, but Serenity, what about this panel where Eren remembers Grisha's words, "You are free"? Simple answer. Maybe Isayama just put it there because he remembered he was supposed to draw this panel. Like I said before, Grisha has no right to tell Eren he is free. He is not physically free because of the walls of parity and the outside humanity. This is the equivalent of a black slave telling his newborn that they are free, even though by law, that newborn is now a slave. Once that child grows up, guess what? They'll be a slave. Grisha telling Eren he is free does not make sense because once Eren grows up, Grisha burdens him with his sins. Isayama wanted to redeem Eren at the end by stripping him of his agency, but this would mean he would be a slave to fate or slave to Ymir.
But don't worry, he's actually a free slave, because his father told him he's free. Free to have no choice but to follow this path Ymir set for him.
Yes, of course. Listen folks, just realize that taking this panel literally would not require so much effort and headcanons.
You just take this panel where Eren's head is messed up, and this panel where he doesn't know why, and draw the easy conclusion that the founding Titan powers messed his head up to the point that he forgot why he did it. Take this panel where he did the rumbling to get to Mikasa's choice because the Founder Ymir wanted to see Mikasa's choice, meaning Eren was manipulated by the Founder to do the rumbling. Invaders' interpretation, you need to agree with his headcanons, otherwise it won't work.
Oh, what was that?
Eren planned the 100% rumbling from the start, and only planned the 80% rumbling after he received memories from Ymir in chapter 122, but Invader spent his entire video building up the nature of Eren and that doing the 100% rumbling was his desire. Invaders was basically going backwards after saying touching Ymir gave Eren memories. Invader says at 48 minutes 41 seconds.
Again, Eren is in no way compelled by supernatural forces, like fate or destiny, to take these actions.
The most homosexual man alive would never consent to having sex with a woman. The author writing the story keeps emphasizing that he will never have sex with a woman because that is not his desire. But the author, realizing the heterosexual romance gives him money, writes in the idea that the homosexual man actually received memories of his future him having consensual sex with a woman. But how could this be? The man's desires was only having sex with men. Oh, but don't worry, since he saw heterosexual intercourse in his memories, this must mean that the heterosexual intercourse was that man's desire. But it was firmly established that he would never do this. Since determinism is the cause and effect, you would obviously ask, why would he even see this memory in the first place if it was not his desire? What you're basically telling me is that through outside influence, the homosexual man is manipulated into believing the heterosexual activity was his desires all along, and that he has to have sex with a woman because he saw himself have sex with a woman. This is not determinism, this is fate and destiny. They say Eren's knowledge of the future does not affect Eren's actions because that future is caused by his nature. If it was in Eren's nature, then he should have never seen himself get stopped. Eren's knowledge of the future does not affect Eren's actions because that future is caused by his nature? Yeah, he still changed his plans because of that future, which wasn't his nature because his nature would be going 100%. If the cause and effect, determinism, was really due to his desires, then Eren's memories from touching Ymir should have been memories of him completing 100%. Once he touched Ymir, yeah, he still went along with it. That wasn't his desire anymore. That was his fate and destiny. Oh no, he's not a slave to fate and destiny. He's a slave to freedom. No, you don't get it. I was talking about Invaders' compatibilism.
In this way, I believe that the universe of AOT operates on the theory of compatibilism. The belief that we are still responsible for the actions we take, even though we lack true free will.
It was impossible for Eren to lose. He had the powers of a god. If Eren was a slave to freedom, then it would be his desire to go 100%. Then Invaders talks about Eren gaining memories after getting the Founding Titan. But see, even with Invaders, it all ties back to the Founding Titan powers messing Eren's head up. If you take this panel literally, all you need to explain why Eren did the rumbling is contained in chapter 139. And this is the best part of this section, because if the anime doubles down on slave to freedom, so you don't take this panel literally, Invaders' own interpretation would still be excusing Eren by reason of insanity the moment Invaders said Eren gained memories after gaining the Founding Titan. Because Eren's desires was the 100% rumbling, him seeing 80% rumbling wouldn't have been his desires. He should not have been able to see this unless there was an outside source. So, do we know the outside source who wanted the 80% rumbling because this would mean Mikasa made a choice? The founder Ymir. That was her desire to see Mikasa's choice. The irresistible force of the Founding Titan manipulated and compelled him to do 80% even though it wasn't his desires. Even with Invaders' interpretation, Eren is not responsible for the rumbling by reason of insanity. Now people might say Eren was responsible for the rumbling because he didn't get influenced by Ymir to do 80% until after he gained the Founding Titan. And I tell you, according to chapter 139, Ymir groomed Eren to be killed by Mikasa since chapter 1, even before Eren was a Titan shifter. By the Founding Titan messing his head up, he had to manipulate everything to get to this result, the result that the founder Ymir desired. Again, being manipulated by the irresistible force of the Founding Titan means Eren is now responsible for the rumbling by reason of insanity. Back to chapter 139. Chapter 139 itself, Eren says he planned the 80% rumbling at the medal award ceremony in chapter 90 when he received memories from Historia. But again, don't worry, Invader says at 39 minutes 9 seconds.
When he kissed Historia's hand at the medal ceremony, Eren saw his own future. However, the way that this happened, and what Eren learned from this event, are almost universally misunderstood.
Invader says at 46 minutes 2 seconds.
Also, Eren's dialogue with Historia when he explained his plan to her does not make sense if he knew the full consequences of the rumbling at the time.
The final chapters of the story had Isayama forgetting details in his own work, but basically Isayama retconned a lot in the final chapters. Here's the interview of Isayama admitting to forgetting details of his own story. So Isayama writes an acronym having her memories manipulated, even though it doesn't make sense. Zeke's death stops the rumbling, even though it doesn't make sense. I repeat this again, Invader says at 46 minutes 2 seconds.
Also, Eren's dialogue with Historia when he explained his plan to her does not make sense if he knew the full consequences of the rumbling at the time.
Eren was doing the 100% rumbling after he kissed Historia's hand, and even after he gained the Founding Titan. Eren saying he planned the 80% rumbling from Chapter 90 in the Medal Award ceremony means he planned the 80% rumbling from Chapter 90. This is a retcon. This dialogue not making sense if Eren knew all this time is what makes this bad writing. Because Isayama retconned Eren, who was originally going to do 100%. Let me repeat Invaders to emphasize his logic on why it can't be Chapter 90 despite Chapter 139 saying so, that it had to be Chapter 122. Invader says at 38 minutes 51 seconds.
The reason we know this is true should become self-evident as we talk more about it. It's the only way that what we're presented with makes logical sense.
Invader says at 46 minutes 2 seconds.
Also, Eren's dialogue with Historia when he explained his plan to her does not make sense if he knew the full consequences of the rumbling at the time.
Invader says at 1 hour 10 minutes 20 seconds.
I mentioned this earlier, but what Eren said to Historia didn't make sense if he already knew everything about the future. There was no advantage to lying to her if he already knew everything. If Eren knew that the rumbling would result in the end of the Titan Curse, there was no reason for him not to explain that to her, as it would make her more willing to cooperate with him.
Chapter 139. Take it as it is. Eren planned the 80% from Chapter 90, not from Chapter 122. Yes, Eren planning 80% from the start doesn't make sense. That's why we hate the ending. And just so you know, this is not the first time Invaders uses this kind of logic. Look at his comment in his rumbling video. He concludes that the extra pages where Parody gets bombed is not the outside world bombing Parody. What's his evidence? Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for Isayama to ruin his themes. Yeah, that's a good one, Invaders. That's why we hate the ending, because it's nonsensical and ruined his themes. Invaders' logic is this. The outside world bombing Parody makes no sense. Therefore, the outside world did not bomb Parody. It has to be unrelated to the Parody outside world conflict, otherwise it makes no sense. Hey Invaders, why do you think Parody got bombed due to civil war?
The reason we know this is true should become self-evident as we talk more about it. It's the only way that what we're presented with makes logical sense.
This one comment of his recontextualized his entire Eren video, because it confirmed the suspicion I had that he was fixing everything with headcanons. Because EDs can't accept the idea that Isayama messed up. Continuing on, my biggest gripe about determinism is basically the lack of free will. No free will means no agency. No agency means character choices don't mean anything. Invaders' whole spiel with the Founding Titan giving Eren memories showed us that it was Eren's fate and destiny. Determinism be damned, because compatibilism is now incompatible. Because it is all Ymir's manipulation. Chapter 139, when Eren leads Dina's Titan towards his mother. People argue determinism and time paradox. If Eren did not do this, then Dina would have never gone to his mother, leading to a paradox. Trouble is, there was already a very valid reason why Dina found Grisha's house and ate Carla. Chapter 87, Dina, before she becomes a Titan, she says, Grisha, no matter what I become, don't worry, I'll find you. Dina ignores Bertolt not because of Eren, but because she was a Titan made abnormal to fulfill the promise she made to find Grisha. This plot twist was unnecessary and ruined Eren's character. But the answer? Oh wow, why do you think Dina's Titan was an abnormal Titan? She was abnormal because of Eren. But this leads to another question of whether Eren was responsible for every abnormal Titan's actions. Invader says at 1 hour, 20 minutes, 6 seconds.
I already talked at length about his lack of free will, and that lack of autonomy was made explicitly clear with the last plot twist of the story. The reveal of what actually happened to his mom on that day 9 years ago.
This would not even be necessary if Isayama didn't even write this. Does Guts need to go back in time to hang his mother from a tree? No, he doesn't. Determinism is what enabled people to defend this. Of course, Eren had to kill his mother, otherwise he would have not had the motivation. He was already motivated to join the scouts even before his mother died.
Let me explain how determinism can be a little bit tiring.
Eren frees the pigs through Ymir.
This would make sense in a deterministic universe, right? Because it is through Eren's desires to do the rumbling that he tells Ymir to free the pigs.
Because if he doesn't tell Ymir to free the pigs, Ymir would never have freed the pigs, which means the story would have never happened, and Eren would have never accomplished his desire of the rumbling. Just ignore the possibility that Ymir freed the pigs out of her own volition and not out of any manipulation. Just focus on the determinism aspect, yeah?
Just ignore the possibility that because of Ymir's role as a slave, she desired freedom. Ymir freeing the pigs would be her trying to experience freedom. You have to ignore that interpretation because it would be similar to Grisha and his father. Because this would lead to sins of the father, a theme you're supposed to forget. Just focus on your determinism and slave to freedom, yes?
Why am I telling you about the pigs and determinism? Because I wanted to show you how Invaders' little determinism is confusing even his own sheep. Or how about this? Eren manipulates 3 Eldian men to go to Mikasa's house and kill her parents and kidnap her. Eren has to do this because if he doesn't, then Mikasa would have never been kidnapped and Eren would have never saved her, and that means this story would have never happened. And it makes sense because it was Eren's desires to do the rumbling, right? And if Mikasa was not there, then Eren would not have been able to get the Founding Titan powers from Ymir, and Ymir only gave her powers to him to see his head get cut off by Mikasa. Deterministic universe, it makes sense.
Now, what about Grisha? Why did Grisha give Eren his Titan despite asking Zeke to stop him? Doesn't matter because determinism. Can you see how choices don't matter because of determinism? Chapter 121, Grisha says, "Why won't you show me everything? The wall's being destroyed the day it happens, if Carla is safe." When Grisha tells Zeke to stop Eren, Grisha did not know that Carla died because of Marley breaking the walls. Chapter 71. It is after Eren tells Grisha that Carla got eaten by a Titan that Grisha gives Eren the Titan powers. Chapter 63. Grisha, while giving Eren the serum, tells Eren to avenge his mother. Why did Grisha give Eren the Titan powers, despite asking Zeke to stop him? Grisha gives Eren the powers because Carla died, and Grisha wanted Eren to avenge her. It is through Marley's choice to break down the walls that they face the consequences of Grisha snapping at the knowledge of Carla's death.
Because remember, Grisha stopped his restorationist mission for the sake of his family.
It is through Marley's choice to feed Faye alive to dogs that they faced the consequences that came after Grisha became invigorated in avenging her death.
Remember, Grisha tried to be the better man and not go forward on his plan for the sake of his family. But again, Marley happened. Grisha allowing Eren to do the rumbling will not just avenge Carla, but end this cycle of hatred. So, chapter 137, Grisha joining in to stop Eren, despite giving him the power in the first place, does not make sense. Stop using determinism to cover up plot holes and bad plot twists. I'll finish this convoluted point with this.
In Berserk, Griffith became Femto out of his own free will. Everything that happened afterwards, out of his own free will. Guts, literally called a struggler, will not back down. Guts, despite being branded, will not resign to his fate. The idea that because Mikasa was influenced by Casca, Eren has to be Guts is not valid simply because Eren was a slave to fate, and Eren gave up when facing fate. Eren's free will to do the rumbling, Griffith's free will to become Femto. However, for Eren's case, determinism convolutes his agency and free will, because if it was truly Eren's free will and desires, Eren would have completed the rumbling and guaranteed his friend's safety. Chapter 139, Eren was following fate. Mikasa was influenced by Casca. Eren had both aspects of Griffith and Guts, but is way more in line with Griffith than Guts. Again, relationship-wise, that is not a good thing.
And I know I said I'd finish this point, but I have to elaborate on fate Let me show you a little something. The declaration of war in both Berserk and Attack on Titan.
Berserk chapter 91, Guts and his declaration of war against the apostles and the God Hand.
Guts says, sacrifice, offering, destiny, quit spouting out a bunch of cryptic explanations. The point is, this is war. It ain't different from any other war. The last one standing wins. If I get hit, I will hit back.
Tell them, leaving me half-eaten is gonna be the end of you. I'll hunt and kill all those wretched monsters, and all of you, down to the last one. This is my war declaration. Guts' declaration of war against his fate of being a sacrifice in response to the brand of sacrifice.
Attack on Titan chapter 100. By Willie's declaration of war to kill everyone on Paradis. It was Paradis' fate to be destroyed by the outside world. It was Paradis' fate to be the sacrificial lamb. But Eren chapter 131 says,
plus, it's a fact that if all the Eldians got wiped out, the Titan problem would disappear with them.
But I just can't accept an end like that. By Eren's dramatic response against Willie's declaration of war, you can see this as Eren's own declaration of war in fighting against fate, the fate of Paradis' destruction. Why, chapter 131 Eren says, that I will kill them is already set, which means we also never found a way for Paradis to survive. Chapter 40 Ymir says, if your will is that strong, then shouldn't you be able to change your fate? Through Eren's strong will and conviction, he will be able to change Paradis' fate of being destroyed. Chapter 121, because Eren's will was that strong, Eren broke the chains of paths to change fate, because there was no other way to save Paradis other than through the rumbling. So Berserk and Attack on Titan, through both stories as declaration of war, we can see the main characters as fighting against their fate of death. And in their constant struggle to fight against fate, their strong will allow them to change fate. In this case, oh wow, I can definitely see similarities between Guts and Eren. Except, this is not the narrative ending defenders believe, do they?
No, Eren was never fighting against his fate because that fate was his desire.
So you know what that means? It means ending defenders by their own logic have no right to say Guts is to Eren as Mikasa is to Casca because Guts was fighting against his fate and Eren became fate's bitch. Oh, what was that? Eren was too weak to go against his own nature? Oh, like Griffith, so Eren is to Griffith as Casca is to Mikasa. And before you say, again, slave to freedom, that was his desires. I did believe that Eren was a slave to freedom years ago. Why I hate slave to freedom now, and don't believe it, is because ending defenders made it make no sense with their interpretation. Ending defenders' interpretation of slave to freedom is different to ending haters' interpretation. Ending haters believe that because he is a slave to freedom, he will kill 100% of humanity in pursuit of freedom, to free himself and his people from their oppression, because everyone is born with the right to be free, and since the world seeks to take their freedom away by taking their lives, Eren, because he is a slave to freedom, will respond by taking the outside world's freedom away. Ending defenders' slave to freedom is the mental freedom of Armin's book. Because there were humans outside, Eren threw a tantrum and killed humanity for his childish dream of Armin's book. That even if humanity was nice and accepting of Eldians, Eren would still rumble the world. Because the rumbling was Eren's ultimate idea of freedom, Eren would not choose the alternatives. Eren's rumbling is not justifiable because he's not actually defending his people. It was because he became a slave to his desires, his idea of freedom. The mental freedom of Armin's book. Ending defenders believe it's fine if Eren does not accomplish physical freedom. It's fine if he only goes with 80%. It's fine if this results in absolutely nothing being achieved in the story, because even if Eren accomplished 100%, he would still be a slave to freedom. Bro, there will always be things that limit you. Do you see that man trying to murder you and your entire family? And it is your desire to want your family to live because everyone has the basic human right to live and be free. And it is because of your desire to live and be free that you kill the perpetrator in self-defense. Bro, you let your desires consume you. You are a slave to living. Bro, there will always be things that limit you. Eren, just let the outside world kill you and your entire people, even though you guys did nothing wrong. Because it's better than being a slave to freedom and fighting back against those people. Now that should be enough about this slave to freedom nonsense. Continuing on.
Say still refused to see the connection between Eren and Griffith. Berserk chapter 17 Casca says, I want to be by his side. If he's going to sacrifice everything for his dream, if his dream is to fight and cut away his own path, then I want to be his sword. Of course, Casca says this was a bluff in chapter 45, but Berserk chapter 28 Casca says, I always think this, when the battle is over and Griffith is surrounded by everyone cheering in victory, that he's somehow out of reach, that he exists somewhere far away, and it hurts. AOT chapter 45 Mikasa says, why is it that Eren always gets so far from us? When you put it that way, Eren has always been running off on his own and leaving us behind. Whether it's of his own free will or not, he always does this. I guess that's just his destiny. All I want is to be close to him.
AOT 2015 interview by Isayama, where he states that Eren viewed Mikasa as a mother figure rather than a lover. We can see that. Mikasa will restrict Eren's freedom to make sure he's safe, like an overprotective mother figure. So Eren will move away from Mikasa. Since Mikasa is to Casca as Eren is to Griffith, then Mikasa should learn to move on from Eren. Casca should move on from Griffith.
If Mikasa's character is influenced by Casca, then Eren would be Griffith, not Guts. Even if you choose to isolate the relationship aspect, Eren and Mikasa's relationship does not have the same development as Guts and Casca. Berserk chapter 46 and 47. Guts and Casca laid themselves bare. They allowed themselves to be vulnerable in each other's company, feeling comfortable enough to turn towards your loved ones in your lowest moments, rather than trying to isolate yourself and turn away from their support. Not necessarily the vulnerability I had in mind, but let's roll with it. Guts and Casca did. Eren and Mikasa did not. Did Eren make himself emotionally vulnerable to Mikasa that he was able to share his thoughts and values? Chapter 123. Mikasa and Armin do not give a fuck about Eren's solemn demeanor. They noticed it, but willingly chose to ignore it.
When the alien rights group meeting got hostile, Eren left and literally isolated himself from his friends. He couldn't at least talk to John, who understood his reason for rumbling the most. Eren did not bother confiding in Mikasa about anything.
Are we going to use chapter 138 as their vulnerable moment? When Guts and Casca were vulnerable, they were truthful with each other.
They both accept each other despite their flaws. Chapter 123, when given the clearest of opportunity, Mikasa family zones Eren. Chapter 138, Eren says he wants Mikasa to move on. This is a lie according to chapter 139.
Do you know who Eren does confide in? Flock and Historia.
Am I saying Eren is being vulnerable to Flock? No. It's just that specifically, Eren would rather resort to genocide than burden Historia and her bloodline. You were the girl who saved me that day, the worst girl in the world. Eren was quoting Historia, who chose to live for herself. Maybe humanity should be the ones to die. And there you go, more shared values. Live for yourself duo. Eren and Historia would choose to let humanity die than burn their own people. Historia and her orphanage. All because children are the future. Like how Eren valued Paradise's children and the future generation. They want to keep forcing children into eating their parents. I won't let them. Eren has a lot of trust in Historia. He trusted her enough to tell her about his plans. He trusted her enough to keep a secret for this long. Of course, you can always argue that Eren was not being vulnerable to Historia here, but the difference remains. He isolated himself from his friends, but confided in Flock and Historia.
Now remember when I told you that Mikasa and Eren lacked any mutual understanding? Berserk chapter 17, look at Griffith and Casca. Next page, Griffith puts up a mask. Berserk chapter 47, look at Guts and Casca.
Are they putting on a mask? Pretty sure they accepted each other despite their exposed weaknesses. AOT chapter 138, Eren is putting on a mask. He actually wants Mikasa to be hung up on him. Mikasa is to Casca as Eren is to Griffith. The idea that Eren and Mikasa accept each other is laughable. For Mikasa's side, it's funny, because Isayama kept hammering in the point that Mikasa would not accept the Eren that wasn't her idealized version of Eren. For Eren's side, he is anything but accepting of Mikasa.
First example, chapter 50, when Mikasa goes in for the kiss, Eren does not accept the kiss. Mikasa tried to kiss because she accepted their deaths. If Eren did kiss Mikasa, it would mean that he accepted death without a fight.
Eren was and is not the type of person to give up. I already gave the example of Erwin's final speech and how that related back to chapter 50, but let me give another example. This one is Eren's own words. Chapter 106, Mikasa says, "If we don't win, we die. If we win, we live." Goes back to Eren. "If we don't fight, we can't win. Fight." Did Mikasa technically accept Eren by accepting these words? Yes, of course she accepted his words. Doesn't mean she accepted him. She preferred the idealized version of Eren she worshipped. Second example, chapter 138. Mikasa's goal was quite the opposite of what Eren wanted, which was to be free outside the walls. Mikasa wanted to stay home. She was content just surviving with Eren. She wanted to live in ignorance. Attack on Titan chapter 1, Eren says to Hans, "We don't have to go outside the wall for our whole lives. We can eat, sleep, and survive just fine here. But isn't that like being a caged animal?" Eren does not want to just survive. Eren does not want to live like a caged animal. Eren wants to live free outside the walls. This was clear since chapter 1. Mikasa is content with just surviving with Eren, even if it means living like a caged animal. She does not care. She just wants to stay home. Eren does not want to stay home. Chapter 138. In this impossible timeline, Eren is miserable in a home they ran away to.
And before I finish talking about the waterfall scene, I just have to make the point that Guts and Casca's intimate moment here, where they laid themselves bare and vulnerable and where they accepted each other, led to Casca being pregnant. If Casca is Mikasa and Eren is not Guts, then the one who impregnated Mikasa is...
Armin.
Alright, say you disagree with the interpretation of Guts and Casca here. Okay, understandable. Apparently I misinterpreted the scene. Guts and Casca weren't being vulnerable to each other here. This was just a sex scene for the sake of a sex scene. Griffith, this wasn't him putting up a mask. This wasn't him hiding his vulnerability to later be compared to Guts and Casca being truthful and vulnerable. This was just a happy Griffith scene. Apparently there's no evidence that Eren is more similar to Griffith than Guts. Clearly, Eren is Guts. I'll use more examples of Griffith then. Like I showed earlier, invaders and ending defenders say that Eren was doing the rumbling because he was having a temper tantrum from not getting what he wanted. A world without humanity, like Armin's book. In Berserk, who do you think this would apply to? Guts or Griffith? It would be Griffith, because he threw a tantrum after his possession. Guts chose to leave him. Are we going to disagree with that interpretation? AOT chapter 138, Eren would not be satisfied with a life like this with Mikasa because he wants his freedom. Prior to the eclipse. Chapter 72, Griffith had a dream of a life, a normal life with Casca. Would Griffith choose to have this normal life, or would he choose to continue pursuing his dream? Through Griffith's conviction to reach his dream, he would sacrifice the Band of the Hawk. Because if he doesn't sacrifice the Band of the Hawk, then all the people who sacrificed their lives for his dream would have died for nothing. AOT before chapter 139, the interpretation of Eren's rumbling would be him bearing the responsibility of all the scouts who died to free humanity inside the walls. If Eren doesn't do the rumbling, then Parody would die, and everyone who died for Eren would have died for nothing. Because Eren actually cared about Parody, not just his friends. Griffith and Eren would sacrifice their humanity in pursuit of their goals. Griffith and Eren would sacrifice their loved ones for the sake of their goals. Chapter 27, Armin says, "The people capable of changing things are the ones who can throw away everything dear to them. When forced to face down monsters, they can even leave behind their humanity. Someone who can't throw anything away will never be able to change anything." Eren sacrificed his humanity to achieve freedom. But an argument could be that Eren threw away his pursuit of freedom for his friends to live long lives. Erwin's motivation wasn't to save humanity, but to prove his father right. He was obsessed with this, but he gave up on his dreams and died. Kenny wants power, but he gave up on his dreams and died. Therefore, Eren also has to give up on his dreams of freedom and die. But like I said in the Three Little Pigs section, this is not the only outcome that could have been written. We could have seen a different outcome. What happens if a man refuses to give up on his dreams and die? Like how Griffith did not want to die in chapter 72. Eren already sacrificed Sasha and Hanji, and didn't know whether his friends would survive. So just complete the rumbling like Griffith completed the eclipse. If the fandom doesn't want all his friends to die, then just let Armin and Mikasa survive the rumbling, like how Guts and Casca survived the eclipse. But Eren is still Guts. Would Guts sacrifice his companions and his humanity to acquire demonic powers and achieve his goals?
No, Eren would be Griffith, not Guts.
Well, continuing with Berserk. Berserk chapter 34, Judo says, she, Casca, can't be with Griffith. For Casca, Griffith is truly special. It goes beyond any feelings for him. He rescued her from despair and gave her a new life. So it's more than love she feels for him. It's more like worship. Despite all her efforts, can she find happiness being a woman longing for a man she can't ever have? Beside him, a woman he can't afford to refuse in fulfilling his dream. That woman can grant him the thing he most desires, the one thing Casca herself definitely can't offer him. Can Mikasa offer Eren freedom?
Well, she can offer him to live in ignorance, which is basically freedom. Oh, well, can Historia offer Eren freedom? What kind of freedom are you referring to? Physical freedom or mental freedom?
Well, it wouldn't matter because she technically did both. Physically freedom from his chains, mentally freedom, like Carla from his nihilism, by giving him the motivation to live.
And it is by teaching him to live for himself, valuing himself over humanity, that he goes along with the rumbling to save himself and his people, because humanity should be the ones to die. But if you were referring to, can Historia offer Eren freedom now, when Eren is trying to achieve freedom by doing the rumbling and killing the people who want to take away his freedom? Between Mikasa and Historia, guess who's the one who was actively going against Eren?
I'll give you a hint. It was not Historia.
You know the weirdest part about this? Griffith was using Charlotte as a tool to reach his desires, his kingdom. Going by Ending Defenders' logic, Historia was only used as a tool for Eren to reach his desires, his freedom. The pregnancy was only used as a distraction for Eren and Zeke to finish their plans. Okay, so Eren is Griffith and Casca is Mikasa, because Historia would be Charlotte. That's good to know.
I'll finish this with the bird imagery. Berserk chapter 24, Griffith is the White Hawk, leader of the Band of the Hawk.
This ruthless character who will stop at nothing to get to his goals is represented by a bird. White Hawk or White Falcon, who cares? You choose the bird. All that matters here is that the animal is a bird. AOT chapter 139, the ruthless character of Eren, who will get to his goals after all he sacrificed is, Now, I won't say that Eren reincarnated as a bird, but it is awfully convenient that there exists a bird called the parasitic Jaeger bird. Number 1, parasitic, the hallucigenia wormcoon. Number 2, Jaeger, Eren's last name meaning hunter. Number 3, parasitic Jaeger bird is a seabird, keyword ocean. But hey, one bird was clearly obsessed with his dog at the start of the manga, and the other was reckoned to be obsessed.
Guts leaving Griffith and the Band of the Hawk in chapter 36 mentally messes with the White Hawk's head. Griffith become Hawk, crying. Mikasa finding another man. The parasitic Jaeger bird doesn't want that. Ellen becomes Dove, crying.
Again, I'm not saying that Eren became a bird. I'm saying that somehow Eren is controlling this bird. Because there is no way you can tell me this is just symbolism. This is too literal to just be symbolism. And in a world with man-eating titans and people who can shift into titans because of a giant worm parasite, Eren controlling a bird to always wrap a scarf around Mikasa is not very outlandish. But no, you want me to believe that this is just a random bird. Berserk chapter 348, is this a random dog? This black dog has a left foreleg gone. Black dog has a right eye gone. The brand of sacrifice on this black dog. No way. Chapter 348, Shirk says, this is Guts as he exists in this world. Careful, Shirk. The people in the AOT fandom might throw a hissy fit over your literal interpretation of this clearly random dog.
Okay, how about this? This is literally Guts as a dog, but this Guts the dog is symbolic of the real human Guts. How about that? Dragging a casket, which just so happens to carry a broken doll. I'm sure of it. This is Casca. Shiak, sister, you will not last 1 minute in the AOT Ending Defender fandom. They will hound you regardless of if you are a child, simply because you think this doll is Casca. Berserk chapter 352, the dog equips the Berserker armor.
Shiak says, there's no doubt that's the Berserker armor. It's Guts turned into the Berserker. And this dog has a really big sword. Why do you keep saying this, Shiak? Reading comprehension devil makes another contract. You hate to see it. That dog is not literally Guts.
Oh, and big random falcon goes after the random dog. And look at the fight. Look at the appearance of the falcon. And before anyone says, this is Griffith, you are dumb. You are stupid. This is just a random bird, brother. Before you say, this is literally Griffith, the white falcon, as he exists in that world, which is symbolic of the Griffith in the real world. No, this is just a random bird. The random dog bites the random bird. The group exclaims, guts! I can't believe it. It's happened again. Stop saying that this dog is guts. It's not guts. Alright, it's just a random dog. Stop saying that this bird is Eren or is being controlled by Eren through the founding titan powers. This is just a random bird wrapping a scarf around somebody that just conveniently happens to be Mikasa. And Mikasa, right after the bird wraps a scarf around her, just so happens to look at the bird and say, "Thank you, Eren, for wrapping a scarf around me." Wow. Thank goodness Isayama did not write Berserk. Guts thanks Griffith for killing the Band of the Hawk. Oh no, this makes perfect sense. Guts isn't thanking Griffith for the sacrifice. He's just trying to understand Griffith. Isayama just didn't have the ability to write such a complex scene with such complex emotions.
Yeah, okay, Berserk did the bird thing better than AOT. And can you see it now? Eren is to Griffith as Mikasa is to Casca.